You gotta love the intro music.
Well, hey everyone. Good afternoon.
Hey Valerie.
Hey John.
Nice to see you.
Thanks. All right. So I think what we wanted to do today was talk a little bit about Infinite Green, talk a little bit about our origin story, share a little bit of insights of where you were in your lives and in your careers back in 2009 when Infinite Green really got started, and kind of what the ideas were behind it and what you were hoping to accomplish back then.
2009. Let's see. I had
2009.
John had hair. And every time I hear like origin story, I think of Stan Lee. Like I think I'm Stan Lee.
Wolverine origin.
Wolverine, Daredevil, Iron Man. Right, yeah. Writing those brand new in the 60s and 70s. Anyway,
it is kind of funny though. I mean, I was 41. You were still in your 30s, McIntyre. And we had this great idea. We had actually been talking about it for 10 years. So we had talked about it. And we were at Carlson Travel. We talked about starting our own consulting company. And, it was, well, what would we do? Well, everything that we do now. And thank goodness we didn't jump out in at that point, because I don't think we probably wouldn't have lasted too long, more than likely. Because if you think about, Scott, what we learned in the next 10 years after that, before we did start, we had great experience and great learnings everywhere we've gone. But I think the roll up of everything, working for really big companies and, with a lot of moving parts, allowed us to kind of wear a whole bunch of different hats. And so when the opportunity popped up in late 2008 at Best Buy, and the deal that they were offering for, people that wanted to take a look at a new career choice or, whatever, it just, all the planets aligned the right way. And we decided to walk quickly, run, you name it, put our names in the hat. And the funny thing about the opportunity from Best Buy was it wasn't even like a sure thing. So we could put our name in and say we wanted to leave, and they could say, nobody else, you're too critical to XYZ role or whatever.
Essential. Yeah.
And essential. Yeah. And, so we could pull you back in. So we could decline your request to leave the company. Well, obviously Scott and I didn't do anything anyway. So we were the guys that were like, oh yeah, let them go. They can go. But no, it's one of those things where we knew that if we didn't do it then, we probably wouldn't have done it, and we'd still, maybe we definitely would be in a different place today.
Yeah, I would say there's things that we want. The concept of the business was to help people move faster. And we learned an awful lot about that at Best Buy. Best Buy had a knack. We were there for 9. I was there for 9. John was there for 7 years of straight 15% growth a year. It was how much more can you do and how much faster can you move? And that was such a different environment for us because we came from banking, which is extremely slow. John came from insurance and financial services, which is extremely slow. And Carlson Travel, I'd say, is a little bit faster, but for the most part, these industries were so slow. And so we got to Best Buy, and it was just how fast can you go? And it was so enabling for us to develop new things, to develop ideas, to develop and bring in people to move as fast as we could move, hopefully. And we certainly took some side steps in that process and key learnings about either moving too fast or not defining it enough before we jumped in, or jump in and then redefine it as you went. And those are all attributes I think companies struggle with, and John and I both felt that way. So when we started Infinite Green, it was really to get people unstuck of whether it's a tool or a process or a business model, whatever it might be. And so the Infinite Green came about because green means go, it's fast, it's infinite, it's always moving, it's always changing. And we had this concept of just helping customers with that. We didn't have a very specific service offering attached to it. Like a defined list of services. It was more of, will companies consult with us to help them move faster and to get them through something that they might be stuck with. And that's kind of the whole concept. And we got our first customer within a couple of months. we thought this was easy. And it wasn't easy after we got through that first customer, but that's kind of jumping ahead a little bit. But the other thing I think with Infinite Green, this might be interesting to people, is we had this, we saw a lot of people over the years jumping into their own consulting, and they called it their consulting, their last name consulting, Anderson Consulting, or, name your name, because they thought the name was what was valued in the marketplace, their name, their where they came from. And what we ended up seeing was all these companies that spent a year trying to define themselves as their name without an idea, without something behind it. Like, I can help you.
A differentiator.
Because I am who I am. And that's fine. There's a lot of, you have skills. I'm sure that you could provide those skills to a customer, but the company didn't really have an idea or a concept or a formula, if you will, to follow. And I think we saw that, and our first name was John and Scott Consulting, or something silly.
Scott and John, I think.
Scott and John and Scott.
That might have been a point of contention at some point, huh?
But at the same time, it was really important for us to have this concept, this idea, this model, a framework to work from, so that when you're selling it, it's not just, oh, you have great experiences, I'm going to hire you. It was, yeah, you are hiring our expertise, but at the same time, we have a business concept and a business model and a methodology to follow on how to help you grow. And I think that's one of the things that's really helped us in the early days establish ourselves is, what's Infinite Green stand for? We get that question all the time. Why Infinite Green? What does it stand for? And we go through the discussion about what the business model means, and it was really energizing to people because it was, how did you name yourself? How did you get into this business? Why do you want to help me, move from point A to point B? And we would go through the cycle with them, kind of the infinite loop, if you will. How we defined it at the time. But I think it was energizing to people to see that there are people there to help them transition from a existing solution or existing service model to something that was new, faster, better, and help them realize the benefit. And that's the other thing that anchored our company is, we operate companies, right? That's what we did for our careers. And John says it all the time. If we owned your business, this is what we would do. If we were running your operation, this is how we'd approach this investment or this transition, this change management, whatever it might be. And people really connected with that versus the traditional consulting out there that was, I'm paying for an idea. I'm paying for a business model that you did somewhere else and to copy and paste it in my business, even if it might not fit. And that wasn't our approach. Our approach was, let's create a business model that works for you, your culture, your process, your desired outcomes, your capability, your speed of change, whatever it might be. And we'll work within that construct to get through all that and to get you to a better state versus I'm going to force feed something in. And I think that was why originally when we went out to go to market with the concept, we shied away from the naming ourselves something, like our last names, to this concept. And I think that's really paid dividends over the years.
Mm-hmm. What was your experience using consultants? So, before you came up with the idea to start your own consulting company, did you have really great experiences with consulting companies? Did you have neutral or negative experiences? Tell me a little bit about what your experience was on the company side using consultants prior to coming up with the idea.
Yeah, it goes back to, for sure, we didn't have much at U.S. Bank, Scott, but I think, Carlson we did for sure. We had a lot of different contractors and consultants, mostly at American Express for me and Best Buy. But, I would say that the people that I met through the consulting organizations were fantastic and extremely smart. And, again, part of that was how the engagement was framed up. So, number one, I knew that I wanted to be involved in the deal making and the deal structure versus just be the recipient of the value. So that tuned me in right away to, people are probably going to come and go here, but what is the ultimate output and outcome that we wanted as a team, as a department? At Best Buy at the time, we didn't know if this was a full takeover from Accenture just to rebadge us into a position because they wanted to get into the contact center space, and that's what we were doing for Best Buy. And so there was a lot of like anxiety on the floor around what this was. So from an experience standpoint, I would say we knew that, there were professionals coming in. What we didn't realize until we got involved in more of the deal structure is how much overhead we were paying for in not straight value exchange, right? And what I mean by that is, we're training, MBAs that are just graduating from school, generally speaking. Not that they weren't good people, but we were training people to learn their business on our dime. And when you look at a pro forma kind of environment, and especially at Best Buy, to Scott's point, it wasn't how much, it was more how fast can you get there and do you need more? But there was a definite balance there that we had to be involved with. So making sure that we were not overextending and like doubling the size of our staff because we were putting a consultant with every person in the department, and making it a lot more deliberate helped that model. But, we struggled with the lingering consulting organizations that stuck around for too long. And we're like, what are you doing even now? And they're like, well, my contract doesn't end until, 3 months from now. So little things like that we didn't want to do to our clients was really how we learned what we didn't want to be, but we also learned a lot of really good relationships and some good structure and even some acceleration techniques and models that, like for instance, the experience anchor stuff that we do, and some of those things we learned through these great relationships that we had with consulting organizations.
Yeah, and I would add to John's point, a lot of smart people that we interacted with and learned a ton from. We didn't have a choice at Best Buy. We wanted some investments and some capabilities at Best Buy. We've been asking for them for years. And my boss, Accenture was coming in and kind of rebadging all of IT at Best Buy at the time. And they wanted to also help the contact center organization, the operation overall. And so that's great. We saw the investment levels and we're like, God, we don't need that much. Right? There's a lot of overhead baked into this. And our boss at the time was like, well, you either get investment through this consulting arrangement or you don't get any investment. So would you rather have the money and make hay with it, right, under their structure, or not get anything? And I really had to think about that back in the day because I was not happy about the arrangement. I thought it was too expensive for what it was. But given that, it made me rethink how a company from a top-down perspective wants to see change happen, right? So it's like they're trying to shut us up to some extent. Like, hey, you've been bugging us for years over investment. Now I have an investment path for you and you don't want it. It doesn't make any sense. So I had to really put myself in their shoes saying, you know what, we don't trust you with the money, but we trust this big consulting organization because they have it on rinse and repeat and they do it for Fortune 250 companies all the time. So for them, it was like a guaranteed return. If they were going to give me the money, there wasn't a guaranteed return there, right? And so I had to really change my perspective, I guess, on how to leverage those investment mechanisms with a consultant. And yes, there's a lot of overhead. Yes, we got a lot of stuff done we'd never get done without them. But I could see where people might have a bad taste with the word consulting because it feels like it's happening to you. And John and I had to spend a lot of time with the team and saying, hey, make hay with what you have in front of you. Don't balk it. Don't challenge it. They're not as smart as you. They don't know the business as much, but this is your way to get change. And so leverage it as you can. So I think we had a hard 6 months with the team on getting, these people who were charging you $2.25 to $2.75 an hour to do a training module that you could do yourself as an example.
Right.
And it just doesn't leave a great taste in your mouth when you see the invoice. Like, wow. But in the grand scheme of things, the capabilities that we built with, shoulder to shoulder with the consulting team were far more advanced and accelerated what we could have done on our own with shoestring budgets.
Yeah. So I think to John's point, I think like being a part of framing the engagement creates so much more buy-in from the company's standpoint because you can really kind of identify what it's going to take and where you really need maybe the horsepower, the investment, the focus, and maybe some capabilities also. But, I think from, my transition from being in hospitality and then coming over to the consultant landscape is really like that shift to, put yourself in that customer's point of view, right? I was a customer and I understood what I was getting from the consulting arrangement. Being on the consulting side, I want to make sure that the customer is shaping that with us and is really kind of a part of that process. And so we spend so much time up front really getting to know just what their goals are and what their outcomes are, so that we can tune our approach to each individual company instead of kind of the experience you shared, Scott, which is, some people will come in and they already have like a rinse and repeat methodology or framework that they're going to try to fit into your business, right, wrong, or indifferent, and with very little ability to tune that from your company standpoint. Talk to me about some other maybe very big lessons and learnings that you had over the years that really shaped, how you think about both the consulting experience, but also the customer experience for our clients, that really kind of tuned how you approach each engagement.
Yeah, it's a good one, Scott. You'll remember this one. This was a Geek Squad early one, but we were also doing at Best Buy, we were doing invite the CEO to understand and walk a mile in a consumer relations footstep. So really to understand the output of someone going to one of the 1,000+ stores that we had, maybe had a bad experience. Typically, that's why they would call consumer relations, and then walk them through how we work through those, sometimes executive communications, sometimes bad process. Blu-ray DVD and HD DVD was a big one for us. Project Eagle out there, Brian McCaffrey. And, some of the things that were just ridiculous that we tried to impose as process for company, because it was policy, it was standard, it was a procedural thing, really wreaked havoc with the customer experience. And from a consulting standpoint, we were an organization. Enterprise customer care was kind of a internal shared service to some degree, where we were consulting with our business partners, the merchant teams, the product teams, retail. We would go out and help retail do some things, and capabilities, and how we translated, hey, this is what's in this store, so you can buy it on bestbuy.com and pick it up in the store. Like, all of those connections had to happen. And Scott and I really learned that having the conversation and bringing in the business partners so that their point of view was part of that was probably when we first really got good at consulting. And, I have stories about, we helped calls get lifted off the stores because the stores couldn't answer the phone over 50% of the time that someone called in, but we knew that was a missed opportunity. And so if we could bring those into the contact center, a centralized contact center arena, then we could create value out of that and sell products and be, value add and kind of say, hey, we're here to hear from you. If you need, help, this is what we can do for you. So getting a little bit of that feedback, but we had our CEO, Brad Anderson, at the time come in. We made him a hat that said, customer. We made him wear the customer hat. Yeah. And we literally had him wear the customer hat. And so we walked him through some of these scenarios, and, it parlayed into how we really launched Geek Squad and got it up to scale, because a lot of it was done remotely and the majority of the staff was out in the field. But for Geek Squad, we had to create the understanding of, we weren't just having these great systems to do this experience right up front. We needed to consult with our leaders. We needed to consult with our internal folks and say, how can we get more into this screen or into this system so we can answer these questions that are coming in from the stores, from bestbuy.com, from Geek Squad and whatever. And so I would record calls off of our switch, and good, bad, and different, I would just roll a recording. I would burn them to a DVD or CD, so that ages me. And I would put them in leaders' mailboxes and say, here, listen to these calls on your way to and from work, and let me know what you think. fully knowing that they were going to come back and go, that's the worst experience. That should be much better. And we pay you guys enough money to go do that. Right. So we knew we were putting ourselves on alert, but we also were ready with a capital expenditure request form to say, here are the systems, here's the investment we need to go and do that. So we learned the consulting business during probably the heyday of what we were doing at Best Buy, but we also had been grooming that over the course of several years. But we knew that there was internal value to be had to bring in our business partners into the conversation versus just to go, well, this is the only way you can do it, and we don't have time for you for the next year, so you're going to have to wait. We just, opportunity was everything to us, and we jumped on everything that we could.
And kind of how that relates to our SOP now, or our methodology, is when we have a new client, whether it's a systems issue or a systems evaluation or contact center evaluation or just operations, a front desk, a patient intake process, doesn't matter. We really want to see the experience and observe what those end users are going through with their patients and customers first before we talk to anybody else. And the reason we do that is because, what someone says their challenges are that sits at a leadership level is often informed by bad reporting, bad process,
anecdotes,
how kind of whitewashed a little bit by the opposite. Not that they do that maliciously. It's just that that's what happens in organizations. And one of our funnest stories and one of our early customers with Intuit was we were charged with coming down there and redesigning their IVR for their business, their corporate tax support area. Pro-tax area. And it was on an old Avaya platform because everyone loves Avaya. People still have them for some reason. Hey, if you want to get off Avaya, give us a call. And they were getting off Avaya, but in the meantime, you could patch into, in Avaya's world in the old days, you could patch into the line live. And so we were listening to ProTax, their consumer base. We weren't listening to the end user at this point. We were listening to how they were interacting with the IVR. And it was one of the more fascinating ones because accountants listen to things. They're not as reactionary as a typical consumer is. And so they're listening to all these menus, and the menus were saying things like, hey, if you go online we have a whole FAQ section of how to do this, or, those kinds of things. It's like, and you could hear them in the back, but they were talking back to the IVR, which was great because they were saying things like, I spent 3 effing hours on your website and I couldn't find jack, that kind of stuff. And they were yelling, but they were super patient. And when they got to an agent, they were super nice, but they would yell at the computer. And so we had our first leadership update because we're kind of under pressure to get something done pretty quickly. I was going to turn it off because we were listening live and patched in live. And John said, don't do that. Let it play. And like 5 minutes into the conversation, sure enough, a customer comes on and starts interacting with the IVR. And they're like, how are you doing this? We're like, this is your capability. You didn't know you could do this? Right? So it goes to show that leadership isn't as intimate, even though they think they might be with the data and the reporting and the processes than the end users are. And so part of our methodology has always been, to this day, over 17 years, and Valerie, you can be a testament to this, is that we want to go talk to the end users. We want to see them interacting with a patient or a customer in real time so we can observe where those barriers are and where the frustration points are for the end users and the customers. And that's, I think, served us well, very well over the years, that we tend to look there first and not listen to, leadership's generic way of saying it is a whitewashed, whitewashed. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think inspecting what you expect is such a lost art, right? And I think, John's story about, exposing real live calls to leadership, knowing that they were going to hear some, really negative interactions, is a really courageous act, and something that I think is a really good leadership lesson for people to, be confident in the fact that they've done all that they can with what they have, but then be able to expose the areas of opportunity with solutions that go with it. Right. And so I think like a really strong leadership lesson is to really kind of look at things from a high level as to what would you do if you were king or queen for a day, and then get really deep and intimate with, what's actually going on and how are those things translating to the customer after all of the different layers of operational minutia are kind of added on top of it. And then really analyze that and understand what those opportunities are and how they can be addressed. And so I think that's a really important lesson that we could all learn, is that you can have all of the interviews with stakeholders during a discovery that you want, but then listening to the calls or doing side-by-side observations is going to either support that or expose something completely different. And most of the time it's the latter.
Yeah, the written SOP is not the same as the executable SOP.
Right.
When it comes down to a messy customer talking to a messy agent that's been there 6 weeks, they don't know all the ins and outs of your company and how it evolved over the last 10 years. And customers are expecting you to know all that stuff, right? So the conversations get messy. And that's one thing that I think companies can, what we've learned and what we help companies through is realizing that is you can't design a process. You can't design a process in a bubble. You have to see it play out in real time with the tools that you have and with the customer's reaction to your tools to enhance it. And it's got to be something that involves, and that's getting back to Infinite Green. That's the infinite cycle that we have. Is it's never done. Customers keep changing, your tools keep changing, your products keep changing, your processes keep changing. You have to constantly be reevaluating that experience and enabling and empowering the end user to make hay with what they have.
But there is a true north on the compass, I think, and that's the thing that we really, again, we fight for when we get into an engagement, at least in my opinion, fight in a good way. Like, how do you define what true north is? Like, I remember talking to Megan down at Stuller, Scott, about true north, right? And really defining kind of what 1, 2, 3 years from now, what does a customer experience look like from them, whether it's walking through a bank, walking through a store, online, services, products, you name it. And I think operators tend to focus on 5 feet in front of their face because that's what they're responsible for. But they also have this, call it potential energy of they can see the future and they can see where customers are going because they are so intimate with it. And I think the interesting thing about all of that is it's an and strategy, right? You have to understand where true north is, right? And you have to come down from there because you're not at true north ever, to your point, Scott. We're always working into that, right? But you also have to come in through the trenches of where the customer was in that process. And it might be mid, might be upper, might be lower. But I think that's where, for those of you that sit in the middle between strategy and execution, those are some of the hardest jobs to make hay with because you're taking tops down and bottoms up and trying to do something materially different than the status quo and the culture that has been driven that way for years, sometimes decades, sometimes for longer. And so infusing a little bit of a change into that, but finding what true north is oftentimes, and Valerie, you and I worked on this for United Health, like figuring out what their experience anchors, like what are the 4 or 5 things that they should leave every customer experience or patient experience or member experience with. Is it trust? Is it access? Is it, friendly? Is it, fun? What are those anchors around that experience? And sometimes that helps orient and help define it when it's not really defined out there, even though it kind of feels like it is, but it isn't. It's not the marketing. It's not the branding. It's really how you interpret what it is that's expected of you by the customer in real time so that you can deliver that every time you perform that service. So I think those are the things that really stick and resonate with me around learning how to do that, learning how to walk a client through that without knowing the path, right? It's a compass, not a map, right? There are probably 10 different ways to get there. And the compass tells us where true north is, and a little bit of definition around that goes a long way.
Yep. John, you mentioned something earlier when we were talking about kind of the consulting companies branded by your last name, and you had mentioned differentiator. So when you think about Infinite Green and the different differentiation that Infinite Green brings to companies from a consulting lens, how do we work differently in your perspective?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's the way we engage with our clients. We engage because we're curious, not because we're looking for the jackpot or, the lottery. What we're looking for is how can we exchange value super immediate or as quickly as possible into an agreement. And when we sit down and go, how much will it take us to understand or to discovery for your company? And we really are very thoughtful. I think that's one of the first things we can all agree that we really think deeply about, like, how much do we really need to get up to speed on where we feel the experience is today and what we need to do to make it from here to here, and or whatever, if it's not even defined yet. So I think we have a mentality of let's go in small and then let's grow from there. And if we do that going in small, then that's something that's not a huge burden to the client, but it is skin in the game. So I think the engagement and how we engage and how we think about engagement up front initially is a differentiator for Infinite Green. I think we come in low, we put our own money where our mouth is, and we say we're gonna give you more value than you think you're gonna get out of this. And then when we sit down and, to your point, Valerie, if we are king or queen for a day, here's how we would stage and sequence the from to. If you need help doing that, we're here to help you with that. And 9 times out of 10, they ask us to help them with that journey. So I think that's our differentiator versus going in and saying, how big of a retainer can we get to begin with? And then we'll make hay with it. That's too much of a cross your fingers and hope we've got the right team on the ground, the right catcher's mitt to be able to support all this activity, even though we've got day jobs to manage. And so I think it's the least intrusive, but the most value exchange potential in that, in every situation. And it really allows the client to meet us where their needs are versus us telling them where, we're going to start with them.
Yeah, I would add in that process, one of the things that I think, we do well and most companies don't do well is documentation. So when we engage, we tend to put pictures together. We tend to go right to the whiteboard and start drawing out architectures, processes, business models, whatever it might be. And we start getting reactions like, I didn't realize that is how my business looked, right? And that helps ground everybody in what the problem states and where the sticky points are within their business. And I think most people are visual learners. And we end up, one of the norms I think that we understood over time is that how businesses share information is conversational. That's all great, right? So I can have a lot of meetings in a day and understand my service operations, my support operations, my HR operations, my marketing operations, my IT operations, whatever it might be. And the next day I have the same conversation, and the next day I have the same conversation about the same kinds of problems, but it's not on paper. And what I mean on paper, just documented in general. And so I think one of the things that differentiates us is documentation in a way that's very consumable, and it's not bottoms up. It is somewhere in the middle with a little bit going down and a lot of it going up to make sure people understand how they play their operation or their function plays a role in the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's progress oriented, right, Scott? I mean, it helps get you to stop going back to the least common denominator in every conversation, because no one likes to be that. I don't know as much as the next person in the room. No one wants that. But to your point, having something a little bit more deliberate and progress oriented so that we can all agree that here's where we are baseline today. And now we're over here because we've already moved beyond that, right? And that's really your superpower, Scott. I think in a big way is you were able to visualize a conversation during a very early point in the conversation with a client, and you create a visual that brings the problems, a little bit of the solution, and a little bit of how to chunk it out into bite-sized pieces in a really unique way. And Valerie, your talent comes right after that, right? Where you take that and go, all right, here's how I would compartmentalize it. And so it's interesting how we all have worn those hats in different places at different times because of our perspective or our connection with the need or the problem or the future. And I think that's, again, back to the differentiator, Scott. I think you're right. Documenting, but getting it into a progress-oriented kind of a mode, that's part of the green of Go and Infinite Green as well, right? It's driving forward versus continually dwelling on what happened before and trying to go, okay, who should we blame? Instead, it's what should we dream about so that we can go and get that dream.
The other thing I like that Scott said is, getting reactions, during that documentation phase. And so doing that like real-time socialization allows one of the early things that you had mentioned, John, is letting the client be a part of the framing. And so I think where I've seen, some big consulting really kind of will go away, do some big transformation recommendations, and then come and deliver it, but it hasn't been tuned or socialized along the way. And so it really doesn't feel like it has some connection to the business, certain connection to the pain points. Certain things change day by day, right? During some of these assessments or engagements, there are, different market factors that change what's happening and need to be incorporated into the documentation, the solution, all of that. So I think that socialization piece and getting reactions and being flexible enough in our approach to adjust to those reactions helps us get a better result that is able to be operationalized and really just feels connected to the people that are also a part of it with us, right?
Yeah, I love that. You're right on with that.
Well, fun. What about, so let's talk a little bit about, the way our engagements evolve, right? So if we start with maybe a discovery engagement and work alongside clients, how often do you find that the companies might just say, you know what, you've helped us deliver this solution, you've been a part of it, from idea to conception to execution. We really don't want to build or go find this skill set, or maybe it doesn't need a full-time skill set. Can you help us a little bit with continuing to operationalize that? So how have you seen that evolution of, an engagement or a transformation into a managed services opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 95% of the time, Scott, we at least have some kind of conversation forward beyond what the initial statement of work or the initial engagement looks like. I think it's, a testament to the trust. It's a testament to once you get in, companies are kind of, again, the skin in the game is, okay, now we're committed. And you get a little different level of commitment just to make hay on the back end of it. So, but having the ability to kind of engage, stay within that, within that engagement model. I would say as the evolution of that, I think it's really being, again, back to if they know they're part of the deal and how we've structured it, then the trust is there to go, okay, now I know who on my team can actually come to the table. I can make some room to have that person come and help do this, or this. But 95% of the time they say, please, can you come and help us? We wouldn't have got here without your push, but we also wouldn't have got here if you would have come in with just the golden rule of everything and unlimited time, energy, and resources. You can do anything, right? So it was this really balanced, we brought them into the conversation, but also made it part of their culture forward. And that's when, we've been asked to do things like full financial audits. We've been asked to do company strategies from a business project or from an IT strategy to, can you help us staff as a fractional CIO or CTO into those? So I think it's probably the better way to think about it is we create trust because the hard stuff is done before the real hard work is being done. Because I think trust and communication and culture alignment are more important than we give them credit for up front. And then the work is just the work. And if we can come up with a really good way of accelerating out of the quagmire or a little bit of the sticky wicket that clients are in, that's typically all it takes. They know their business better. We're just there to help catalyze it and get it forward. And if they need help dreaming a little bit more, we can help them dream forward so that we're all marching towards something versus kind of running away from something.
Yeah, we spend much more time helping companies execute than we do defining what it is they should do. And I think that's what we like to do, right? We like to define. Most of the time, they know where they want their business to go. They're just having a little challenge with the tactics, like they can't get investment over the line, or they can't create a financial model that makes sense. They're not, they focus an investment model on expense only instead of growth. IT has their own challenges with budgets, and it's bridging those company functions so that they're not an operator, whether it's in HR or accounting or operations or services. It doesn't matter what department it is. Doesn't feel alone and isolated, because they're not going to make that. They're not going to take that much risk without support from their other teams. And so, what we help do, and I think what we're fairly good at, is helping bridge those conversations and getting everybody on the same page about what is changing, why it's changing, and how does this impact the rest of the organization, versus I feel I have to do it alone. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I think, but John says it all the time, and I see it all the time. The ideas are there, right? We're not coming in with these monster ideas on how to transform your business. We're taking how you see your business, what you dream big with, and then taking that and making it practical and executable for the entire organization, not just you. And that's, I think, one of the critical things that big consulting has a harder time with, is sitting there shoulder to shoulder and helping people through it versus cramming in a business model and saying, make this work. And there's nothing wrong with that if there's a business broken. It's just a different way to approach it. And we approach it with the idea that the people that are in your organization today know what they need to do. They just have a ton of barriers and can't get out of their own way.
Our talented team doesn't pull the SOW out of the drawer and look at it and go, here's my role. We look at it as if we were the business owner. If we were, Valerie, you said this earlier, we look at it as this is our one chance. And we talk about, big system changes or big investments or those kind of things as a once in a career opportunity for some people. Being able to take advantage of it is one thing, but you have to get yourself and write yourself into that story beforehand. And I think how we look at our projects and how we engage is not based on what's written on an SOW. It's based on the reality of you get involved in the conversation. You're curious enough about the end experience. You're curious enough about why it's broken. You don't dwell on it, but then you build the plan with the client on the way out. And that feels so much better to everybody. And it ends up being a successful transition faster into that. They can stand on their own two legs. And that's really, again, part of our brand is our people, our standout talent really know how to engage versus just what questions to ask and what answers to write down. And I think that's a big differentiator for us that we just do not waver on. If we don't have someone that's curious enough and we can teach them the business stuff, we really can't teach curiosity, and we can't teach, I'm not going to stop until I get to the bottom of this and really build it up and out of there versus just dwelling on what it is and going, well, I don't think we really know what we can do here,
right.
And kind of wash our hands of it. So I think that's a bigger differentiator too.
Well, next session, we're going to talk more about standout talent.
Awesome. That was a good leader.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, if you got this far in our video, you could pause it. We have a meeting link in this QR code. If you want to spend some time talking about your own business and how we could help, please reach out. Or if you want to be part of a podcast because you have an interesting story, just reach out, schedule some meeting, schedule some time.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Have a good day.
Next time. All right.
Bye.
Bye.